trying to find a rationale or a reason of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to change in education. And being in a part of special education, student-teacher relationships has always been huge for me, and I'm a firm believer if you can connect with a kid, you can teach them anything and you can solve almost any problem. So a little bit about my life. I tried to do this way back in 2005, and I did not complete it due to lots of life events. So I finally am in a space where I'm able to complete it and feel extremely passionate about what I did. I can't even tell you what I was trying to do 10 years ago because it wasn't relevant to me. So my topic is restorative justice in education, which I'll explain in a little bit. So our purpose, I'm going to tell you guys about my research question, a little bit of the overview, show you my project in Google site, and then you can have questions. You can talk about it or application, that kind of thing. So my big question that I had was, what restorative justice and education practices can be used as interventions to support teachers in creating better climate and culture in their classrooms? Climate and culture has been a hot topic in education all the way from the works of cultural proficiency with Dr. Sharrock Hawley, just better mindsets within the classrooms, getting those relationships between students and teachers to be better. The big reason I chose this was my 3 children, especially my son, so he's on the far left. School was difficult for him in a very cookie-cutter white society for him. All of his teachers were white, had the same type of approach to him as they would any other kid, and were very stringent upon how they responded to him. And he was a very hard to connect kid. And I sat there trying to go helping them figure out how to build connections, thinking outside of the box. And I happened to come upon restorative justices when I was working in an all-black charter school that introduced us to it. And I love the practices. It's very much like positive behavior intervention, PBIS, conscious discipline, and those things. So that is my big why on all of that. So I'm going to show you guys my project here. So it is a Google site. I chose to go Google site because I wanted whoever wanted to share it with to have easy access to it, so they could take it at home, they could be at work, anywhere, and not just something tangible, but something that can be longevity in your hands. So the first part of this is just a simple overview about what restorative justice in education is. So this big guru right here, Howard Zerr, was a big person with restorative justice. So restorative justice comes from judicial branches in history. What they used restorative justice was in the criminal justice system to be able to restore and repair harm between victims and offenders. Howard Zerr took this principle and philosophy and applied it into an educational system, which is very different than when you think of a bullying policy where the bullier or the offender and the victim never meet, or they try to keep them separate, interview separate, and not work as much together. Restorative justice is all about addressing harms, needs, and obligations in order to heal and put things right as possible. A lot of these philosophies and mindsets come from the indigenous people of just harmony and connectedness. Restorative justice has 2 main branches. You have informal practices and formal practices. Informal practices is the majority of what my project centered around. Informal is a lot of what we can do in the classrooms, teacher to student. Any type of professional teaching staff, non-professional teaching staff can do a lot of these simple practices, strategies, and tools. Formal is more reserved for extreme behavior and extreme offenses where you would have, say a student came in and destroyed or stole 15 Chromebooks, and you would have the police involved, you've had community members, you would have administration, all those, the parents and everything else involved as well. Schools have been implementing this for a long time, and it's assisted in reducing student conflicts, preventing bullying, and strengthening classroom communities. So a lot of success within all of that. So the informal, like I had just mentioned, are the in-classroom type of strategies that you can use. So the first one is affective statements, which I think a lot of us have heard these either through conscious discipline or through positive behavior systems. It's using I statements and attaching the feeling and emotion to what that other person has done. So what I simply did here was just put down blanketed statements that you can use to change your mindset of how you speak to kids. So instead of getting mad and like blowing up because you're not first in line, which is a typical thing in elementary schools, you can say, I feel frustrated when you don't pick me to be the line leader. And I've used some of these statements even in my own family, but also in my social skills group. When they're not listening, I feel frustrated because you're talking when I'm trying to teach. Attaching an emotion to the action of what they're doing. And in that process, the offender is aware of the impact of their actions onto the other person, and it teaches empathy in a lot of this. So that was effective statements. Identity building statements. This is where I see a lot of academic application that can be used for this. So if you're having a kid that's struggling with literacy, I wonder if, as a reader, are you ready for this? Giving them that identity of who they are academically, as a leader, as a mathematician, as a designer, as an engineer, especially within a magnet school, to use those words of leadership and all of those things to be able to let them start to hear that they are capable of doing that in that identity type of statement. The agency statements are a little bit more difficult because what we want to say a lot of the times is what we shouldn't say. Like, you put great effort in. We want to really work on saying that hard work is really paying off. Saying that it's going to lead to results, but also knowing that your hard work may not pay off, but persistence is going to help with that. Kind of like that second one. I can see that you put a lot of time into studying for the test, but it didn't work out for you. What do you think happened, and what could you do differently next time? I have a typo there. But when adults make it a habit to use the effective language, they will soon hear students using similar language, which is a very parallel type of mindset as what conscious discipline does with attaching some of those positive things and with your emotion attached to the action and the way you phrase your words. So then down here, we have some more impromptu conferences. This one I really like. Far too often I don't think we listen to kids because kids will talk when they're ready, and a lot of the times they will give us the answers without us having to guess what the answer is. Something as simple as they're struggling in math, asking, do you like math? What do you not like about math? Often they will give us the answers in that. Through a lot of the website, I attached videos for whoever wanted to view it so they could actually see it in practice, to be able to have a model to go back to reference. So a lot of the questions that you can ask in an impromptu conference, and I've kind of already done this with some of the kids, is you just sit them down one-on-one and ask them just a simple basic set of questions. What happened? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What have you thought about since? Who has been affected by what you have done, and in what way? What do you think you need to do to make things right? How could things have been done differently? Granted, this has to be in kind of an ebb and flow based upon the language skill set of your student that you have there, the capability, right? So a lot of the students that we have may not be English proficient, so they may not understand all the words, or have difficulties with learning that they might not understand all of the words that we're using. So we might have to use pictures to draw it out, or some of those things, but those are some of the lead type of questions that you can ask in an impromptu conference. And I like to think of this as when a teacher has a grievance, for lack of a better word, they can sit down with the kid and talk like, this is how your actions are impacting our classroom environment. This is what I need from you. Do you recognize how significant what you're doing is impacting myself and all the other kids, and I want better from you. In a lot of the video clips of schools that are doing a lot of this, the kids weren't even recognizing how significant they were impacting everybody else. And it's a great time to build that student-teacher relationship too. This is the heart of the project right here, circles. I am a huge, huge advocate of circles. So circles can be done in lots of different ways, and there are several types of circles. So I'm gonna just briefly kind of go over the circle concept. They are built on several type of approaches. I'm not gonna read all of them for you, but the whole child approach is that just recognizing there's so many pieces to a kid. The importance of relationships and development and learning. The whole school approach, this is extremely important, that school connectedness in this is that the student feels an attachment to school and to the school community. Positive discipline, really, really big here. Restorative discipline seeks to build a stronger community by involving the whole school community in positive resolution of wrongdoing, by using conflicts as an opportunity to strengthen relationships. That's difficult, but it's been working. We've been doing it here, and we've actually seen strength in our relationships with kids that are doing some of the circles. Another big one to use circles is for trauma-sensitive learning environments. The circle process provides a safe environment and a community within those classrooms for kids to be able to feel safe and start to take some of those risks to talk about their trauma, make connections with other kids with their trauma, and work through some of those pieces, and having that healing piece of the circle process, because your voice is so important, really helps with creating that healthy environment for the school too. And a big part of like what I put in here, the trauma theory can help to reframe academic challenges and student misbehavior, so educators can offer and support rather than punishment. Because far too often we look to see for punishment rather than looking for increasing a skill set that they don't have and recognizing that they don't have it. And that's huge for our trauma impacted kids, that they actually are missing a lot of their skill sets due to their trauma. And then the mindfulness practice, which is really, really big. At the beginning of each circle, there is a mindfulness minute or moment where you just ask for kids to reflect and just have a moment of quietness. I've been doing this now with the breathing balls, or I teach the kids, they all like to go like this and be kind of silly with it, but I kind of let them go with it, teaching them how to breathe and prepare themselves to have kind of an emotional draining conversation at times. So those are the kind of the theories that are supporting the circles. And then the power and obstacles in this. And I thought this was important to put in here, because I think, having been in education for several years, I always felt like there's just a new wave. Okay, we're gonna adopt this practice and stay with it for 2 years, and then all of a sudden there's gonna be another one. And never really understanding why are we doing what we're doing and what research says behind it. And so that's why I kind of put in there the power and obstacles of circles in schools. To me, it really spoke to where my heart is with how we connect with kids, how we connect with other adults in the building, and just how I handle even my own relationships outside of school too. So I just put that little piece in there, and then there's some videos on kind of testimonials of why schools were liking the circles within the schools. So then, how circles work would just give whoever views the website the understanding of what and how to run a circle. Really important to note that a lot of people that run the circles are trained by the IIRP or other institutes, because it is a fairly complex process, and you have to remain objective, you have to somewhat follow a script, and help support all the emotions that are kind of going on in that. So You can kind of do it on your own if you like. I'm not trained at all, so I've been kind of doing it just off of all of my research, but that is one thing I wanna do is go and get trained from a lot of those facilitators. There are people that actually go around and just are facilitators of circles, like get called in at a juvenile detention center to work on repairing and storing harm. I know there was at some of the high schools with gang-related violence in some of the inner cities, they brought trained facilitators in to talk about the impact of that, bring all the teachers around, super powerful. I know in the Twin Cities here, there was one drunk driver stuff at a high school level when there was some drunk driving going on and death in that part. So the circle components, I'm just gonna leave this all, but this would tell the viewer how to handle all of it. Important part is the circle piece, and the reason for the circle is because it's never ending and there are no holes in it, and so that's why you want to have the circle part of it, of just the formation and no furniture. So it's usually in chairs or on the ground, that kind of thing. I don't use the centerpiece. I would like to, but I use the circle format and the talking piece, and then I usually have guiding questions, and we always review the expectations. But that was kind of more for people that want to figure out why are we doing kind of those. But the big part of the website is the circle topics. And I chose certain lesson plans to put on here based off of the needs that my building was seeing. And so these were created by me for what we were seeing in our building. So it gives teachers kind of just a basic starting point. And a lot of them were coming from the Circle Forward book that I used for a lot of them. And I think far too often we have classroom meetings as a responsive classroom technique. Classroom meetings are great in building a community. However, they're surface level. They don't get to the more in-depth kind of stuff. They don't revisit expectations. Talking about what do we expect on field trips, looking back on those, there's surface value, like, oh, what'd you do last night? What was your favorite meal? Something like that, where the idea of some of these informal classroom circles is actually having a topic and building and learning something new about the classroom dynamic. So one of them I chose was creating a happy and safe classroom circle, which is, I think, one of the best ways to start the process, is because you need to have a safe classroom environment in order to go through with all of it. So in the lesson plan that I created, it just kind of tells you the goal, the materials you would need, the preparation, an opening. I always like to do like a poem or some sort of song or something, and I really gauge it to the audience. And then talking about rounds, and I revisit all the expectations. So I created a few of them, so like creating a safe and happy classroom circle. This was a big one, a circle to create our classroom needs. So this is more like expectations. So as a class, they created their classroom expectations and what they need from each other. So there was 2 in that one. I'm gonna say I love all of these, but I do, it's just because I love the whole practice. But creating connection and community. I think with the time constraints, a lot of teachers feel like they don't have the time to be able to do this, but actually, if you make the time now to do it, you're going to have more time in the future because you have a more connected classroom. So the next one was creating classroom and community. So lots of different activities that I put in there. I picked 2 lesson plans in here. You guys time to read all of that. And what I love about this process is it is, yes, teacher directed, but it's student produced. So the teacher isn't telling them what to write. It is all their voice. It is all their thoughts. And it might take a while for them to open up and start talking about it, but usually you have 1 or 2 brave souls that will lead the charge, and then the others will really follow suit with it. And then here's another building relationships. Why are you guys not seeing that? You're not, are you?
It may just be a little delayed.
Yeah, you're not seeing it, are you? I didn't realize that. I'm gonna pause that for a second.